So I'll share with you, by the way, I learned a lot already this morning, so I hope to be able to add a little bit from my perspective. Whoa, that went very quickly there. I'll be talking with you a little bit about land selection, nutrient management, crop rotation, seedbed preparation, mechanical cultivation, and shade through optimum plant count and use of mulch in the context of weed management on our farm. So I'll be touching on all these different topics as I'm, kind of running through the farm a little bit. So our farm is in, whoa, I have no control of these slides, Patrick. There we go. Our farm is in the Hudson Valley. It's in Kinderhook, New York. It's about 0 degrees outside right now. I'm nice and warm in here. But and our farm, when we bought it in 2000, was in pretty much in continuous corn and potatoes. And you can see in this slide, 11 years later, how the farm has changed. So right now, our farm is a diversified integrated operation. We raise sheep, beef, and pork, and some chicken as well. We are, as Patrick said, we are actually a farm inspired by anthroposophy, and we utilize some biodynamic practices in that. And that means that the farm is really a living organism. Right off the back, I want to make a statement that, to me, organic vegetable crop production in context of sustainable soil management is really an oxymoron. And that, as Harold van Es likes to tease us with, we are addicted to tillage. And I think, so whatever I'm going to say and share with you is really, we are trying to really minimize the damage. I like the slide that Steve put in about that plow with those little flames in the back. That's pretty much kind of what we do when we are growing vegetables. And this is a slide that really shows that very well. I mean, this is taken over a 25-year time period where in a sod you build up the organic matter, and in a matter of 10 years you break it all down again. So one of the conclusions you can draw from that slide is that as long as we have our land for 2.5 or 3 years in grass or sod, and only 1 year in cropland, we can actually maintain our organic matter levels. This is the farm this is the South Farm that we bought in '99. When we bought that farm in '99, there were 3 different pieces, 3 different farmers who had farmed on the 375 acres. The farm that you were seeing in the previous picture was a potato farm. We found it when the hills were covered completely with purslane. We couldn't even see the soil. And this particular farmer liked to apply lots of fertilizer, lots of N, P, and K, and no lime. The other one piece was no fertilizer and no lime, and was in continuous corn. This farmer didn't have any money to buy fertilizer, and all he did is when he planted his corn, he applied anhydrous ammonia. And then there was another piece, that was a much smaller piece, where it was another dairy farmer, and he applied fertilizer according to a soil test, and he actually had a rotation with alfalfa. Now, all these pieces, there was no manure applied for at least 50 years, and the organic matter levels were quite low, between 1.4 and 1.7. So that was the dilemma that we were faced with. What we did is we brought up the pH to about, it was about 5.1 to 5.6. We brought it up to 6.3. And then we were still not happy with the levels of calcium and also of sulfur in our soils, and we applied very generous amount of gypsum. And I won't talk much more about it because it was actually a wonderful presentation by Warren about the benefits of gypsum, and we've really experienced that. The other problem that we were finding was that we had a plow pan between 7 and 9 inches deep that we were finding. And what we did here is we broke that open. with a subsoiler. This is a yeoman plow that we use, and we go 2 inches below the plow pan to rip that open. Right now we're at about 18 inches deep, and we are not going any deeper than that. When we till the soil, we're looking at the following things. We avoid any compaction by, of course, avoid trying to work the soil too wet. We also try to use wide radial ties for field prep, and on top of that, we lower the tire pressure during spring field work as much as we can. We also balance the tractor to about 10 to 15% wheel slippage. And then once we put it in vegetables, we try never to drive on the area where we plant vegetables. There we use very skinny tires again, and we drive in a kind of a rail system whereby we continue to drive, because you do a lot of tillage as a vegetable farmer when you cultivate and you plant, but we always drive in the same rail. And we'll see later pictures of that to illustrate that. We also practice nutrient budgeting. And when we talk about nutrient budgeting, when we found the high phosphorus soils, we were very concerned. And so how are we going to balance that with a soil where, for example, there was very low potassium soils? But also we're looking at our hay fields. Every ton of hay removes about 30 pounds of potassium. And possible leaching. When you work under a cover crop in late fall, most of that nitrogen will actually leach out. So then you look at the nutrients that are added to the soil in the form of manure, compost, nitrogen fixation, and, say, liming. And how do you balance that? And with vegetables, we really know that in a way that we have very little phosphorus needs to begin with. And what we are finding, especially with a high phosphorus soil, is that compost can be too much of a good thing, because most compost that's made out of animal manure contains high amount of phosphorus. On our farm, we are bringing in the vegetables at least, 1,375 pounds on the average of composted poultry manure that comes from an organic chicken farm. That gives us a basis of our nitrogen needs, our phosphorus, and our potassium needs. But especially for our potassium needs, we are very much too low for the needs of our vegetables. The way that we are bringing in our potassium is through the hay fields, and also we grow straw on our hay fields as well when we rotate hay fields into a newer seeding. And therefore, we are able to bring quite a bit of potassium in from the larger farm as an organism into the vegetables. But that is not enough, again, to grow crops sustainably for our nitrogen needs, and therefore we are greatly dependent on legumes to bring in the nitrogen for these crops. So both for weed control and for creating a better health in our vegetables, we have half of our land at any given time in the vegetables out of production and put them in green manures. And then of the farm total, about 200 acres is in hay and pasture. What you see here is a kind of like, this is not exactly what it is because I don't have, but it's about what it looks like. That if we are putting a land into a green manure and we apply a little bit of compost, we can see a real spike in organic matter. And then when we put it back the following year into vegetables, it immediately gets burned up again. But what we have done is that over the last 10 years, we have brought the organic matter up with this particular method from 1.7 to 2.4% organic matter. It's not, something that sounds really amazing. I know that some people are claiming to bring up their organic matter levels in 10 years from 2% to 10%, but often that is done with tremendous amount of compost, and their soil tests show elevated levels of phosphorus. This is some of the cover crops that we grow. We really like growing sorghum Sudan grass. Sorghum Sudan grass is one of those cover crops that has high amounts of lignin. The problem with it is incorporation. So when the dairy farmer next door were still in business, we would contract him, and I would cut it with our Moco, and then he would come in and chop it for me. In the meantime, that he is no longer in business, and we have a flail chopper to make it possible to incorporate such a big crop as sorghum Sudan grass. We really enjoy growing bell beans and oats to fix nitrogen, and it's one of those wonderful crops that we can grow right before a cash crop, because we work it under sometime around the middle of June. Here it is mixed with forage peas, the 4010 variety, and Lori Drinkwater of Cornell actually did a biomass test on this and found that we were fixing 200 pounds of nitrogen out of a field like this. This is rye and hairy vetch, the hairy vetch to fix nitrogen, but again, the rye, we actually cut this. We don't incorporate it, we harvest it, and we'll talk about that later. Oats and peas is a great crop that can hold nutrients, fix a little bit of nitrogen, reduce erosion really over the winter months. And if we seed it sometime in the middle of August, what will happen, let's wait one more here, is that we are, I think all three of us have a few problems here with our slides. I apologize for that. I have no control over my slides right now, Patrick. Thank you. Thank you for helping me out. All right, so here you can see a field. After this mow, right before the winter, we mow those oats and peas down. It provides this wonderful cover. And then we come in the early spring, and it's very easy to incorporate that and plant our vegetables. So we grow buckwheat. This is a great weed suppressant. When you talk about shade, for example, to suppress weeds, a cover crop can be a wonderful crop to suppress weeds, because we see that at relatively high rates, and buckwheat is such a great example as a weed suppressant. And a lot of cover crops, especially buckwheat, provide habitat and nectar for beneficials. We grow a little bit of red clover when we don't mind taking a field out of production for 2 years. And sometimes we follow sweet clover after a crop of corn or winter squash, and then we work it under the middle to the end of May, and then follow that again with a cash crop, and it provides the nitrogen needs for that particular cash crop. Incorporation is done with a Courtens chisel plow. Here the Courtens chisel plow is outfitted with S-tines. I want to go back one more time. And here you can see this is the unverfurred attachment with an S-tine and then a leveling bar over here. And that, of course, does not mix the soil up very well. It doesn't. It leaves a lot of plant remnants on the top of the soil. So if we want to plant that in vegetables that particular year, we actually use a double disc bedder that brings up bare ground again and deposit that on top of the shredded green manure. A little bit of an illustration, which is not a very good illustration, because what it does here is that we are trying to lay out the beds here, but this is not on very soft chisel plowed ground. This is on relatively hard packed ground. And then what we do is we lay out the beds, and when this would be soft ground, that's chisel plowed, these mounds will be about 1 foot high, and the cover crop will be buried. We would practice it, for example, after we shred a crop of bell beans and oats, and then we lay out these beds. Now, as I said before, after this, we only drive really on the wheel track itself. The second pass we do is with this modified Perfecta bedder, and I see there is a little bit of a misstatement there. The disc hills are actually provided by Lilliston, not by Bessarides. I apologize for that. And so here we are making a second pass, and then we go over the bed, and you can see on the right side what the finished bed looked like. On the left side in front of the tractor is what the bed looks like after the double disc hiller. And again, if this would have been recently chisel plowed ground, it would be much rougher. The final pass is made with a stake-at-8 combination seedbed maker. And here it is really important that we have a final seedbed where we only go to the depth of where we plant the seed. In order to get weed control, we don't want to bring up new weed seeds. We want to have a very level seed bed, and we only want to disturb the soil to the depth of where we place the seed. We want the seed that we put in the ground to come up, get the moisture from the soil deeper down that is firm, and want to break through. Now that is a very interesting development. And then this is a picture here where you see that in action, whereby we're making the seed bed, and here we are followed again with a bed shaper, and the bed shaper makes a very level and firm seed bed. We also can use the same seed bed maker right in front of the transplanter. Here we're actually planting garlic. Now, to explain a little bit more about what we're doing here, the wheel tracks are at 72 inches. We never drive on the 56 inches bed top. And on that 56 bed top, we can plant either 2 rows, 3 rows, or 5 rows of vegetables. Or we can plant 1 row of plastic mulch. So our cultivation equipment where we control the weeds with is interchangeable. Our 5-row system can also cultivate 3 rows, can also cultivate 2 rows at the same time. Because it is 2 rows 36 inches apart, we plant another row in between that of 18 inches, and we plant 2 rows in between that for 5 inches. The use of transplanting is very important on our farm because we get a real jump on the weeds. So we're using a lot of transplants, and also because what we want to do is with our culture plants, we want to quickly get a lot of shade. We want to have a good stand, a firm stand, and that quickly provides shade to compete with weeds. I apologize again. The next thing we do when we try to provide shade in our vegetables is that when we talk about the use of rye as a cover crop, that we then bale up. We use round bales, and we use that in our plastic culture system. So when we use plastic culture, a lot of people say, like, well, you do that in order to control weeds. We actually have more problems of weeds in between our plastic than we have in our open ground. So when we cultivate in between, especially when you use the row covers, we actually use a horse to be able to cultivate with the weeds. So when we well, you're going to have to do without the slides, I'm afraid. What we do here, when we shred the straw in between the plastic, we are able to control the weeds, and simultaneously, as I said before, we are able to bring quite a bit of potassium into our culture fields. Thank you very much. I apologize for some of the technological difficulties we had with this live presentation.